Welcome everyone to the College of Arts and Sciences 4th Annual Gamecock Teaching Day. And this year we're showcasing some of the best high quality online teaching in the College of Arts and Sciences. So now I'm going to go ahead and introduce you all to Angela Nadeau, who is an instructor in the Department of Psychology.
Thank you, Kelly. I'm excited to be here today to share my ideas in my course that I've been teaching here at USC for probably 5 years now. I'd like to kind of start by talking about the basics of Psycho 101 online to kind of give you the framework, and you have the background for that. In Psych 101, I assume this is true for all of the courses being discussed in this program. It's fully asynchronous. But one of the key features about Psych 101 is it seems that most students perceive it as it's an easy core course, and there's a rush to take the Psych 101 in hopes that it is an easy course, and yet they find out that it's essentially a science. So there's a lot of breaking in to do in the first part of the semester. Generally speaking, about 2/3 of the students are first-year students, but there is quite a range. There can be seniors in the course. So working with quite a differential in terms of academic preparedness and familiarity with online courses. And we were just talking about this before we got started, but the enrollment ranges from about 70 to 150 students. And I really do change my assignments based on enrollment and TA availability. I will offer more writing assignments when I have that TA available to help me with grading. So generally speaking, a lot of what I want to talk about today is stuff that we all practice anyway, the general best practices. But for me, as I prepare for classes, I really work towards emphasizing these particular ways of thinking and really spend a lot of time trying to master that. So I don't have a lot of flashy assignments or activities that students do. But what I do is try to build something that really keeps these main ideas in mind. So when I think about building my class, my first thing that I always want to talk about is, I'm sorry, is there somebody who has a question? Can everyone hear me okay, right? Okay. I just heard something, wasn't sure if it was my computer or not. So presence and engagement, I love going on cruises. So this is my way of thinking. My mindset when I start a class is that I'm captain. And my goal is to be that captain at the beginning of a cruise where they're greeting the guests as they're coming on the ship. They're being active along the way. They're providing announcements. Even though a captain on a ship isn't somebody that you will talk to one-on-one, you know who they are and you know they're present. So I always try to keep that in mind. And I use a lot of announcements in my class to sort of guide my ship, so to speak. And I use brief little lectures called highlights in psychology. I call them HIPs. I wish I had called them CHIPs because I'm really afraid someday in one of the student evaluations, they'll say something like, her hips are great. So, which won't be right. So I need to change the name of that, but they're brief little videos, video lectures that I integrate in each week. And then one of the ways I always provide presence is I give a lot of feedback. So in the assignments that I do give, where they have to provide something written, I'll provide individual level feedback to every student. My goal is to always establish community. At the beginning of the semester, I'll start what's called, I call a psych meetup. I just use that from the sort of the general meetup term, where I have an open session where students can come by and drop into a team session, ask questions, get oriented to the course, meet each other. Because it's asynchronous, I don't want to require that people show up at a certain time and place, obviously, but this is an opportunity for them to meet one-on-one if they'd like to. I always try to acknowledge too that students do their own group meets. I want them to be aware that I'm aware that they actually do that and that they're welcome to invite me to that as well. I like to break up large enrollment classes into small groups for discussions that remain consistent throughout the semester. So instead of students seeing 70 discussion posts, they're seeing 20 to 25. And I will often provide that individual feedback in those assignments, but I'll also try to provide in an announcement course level feedback. So if there's something I need to kind of go back to, I'll use an announcement in order to do that. I always want to be thinking about predictability and being structured. I used to, back when I started teaching, I would do surprise assignments and I would think, oh, wouldn't it be great if I had them do this? And I've learned that students, number one, don't like that so much, but it really adds a lot of strain and disorganization to the course in itself. So no surprises. I use grading rubrics that I post up front at the beginning of the semester. So they're there and I'm not creating them as the semester goes along. I always stick to my schedule as long as, and if I have to make a change to the schedule for some reason, in my practice, I make sure that it benefits the students in some way. So I really work hard to deliver a really organized and structured course, partly in that I sort of mindset of if they don't know what's happening, they're not going to feel comfortable asking or might likely just not participate in the course. I always keep cognitive load in mind, like how much can one handle in terms of information coming in. So when I think about that, I think about how to break down modules into submodules. So they're only seeing chunks of 3 to 7 information pieces. I teach Psych 101, so I think of George Miller and his short-term memory capacity and how really our brains can only hold so much information. And the best amount of information we can hold are 3 to 7 pieces of information at once. Otherwise, we forget. So this is why I do the short lecture videos. If I share additional videos, I do brief external videos. I try to organize all my announcements into chunks of information. And the textbook itself, it's really nice that it's really broken up and divided into submodules as well. So I try to bring that idea and thinking throughout all the different layers of the class itself. One of the main things that is generally my strength anyway, so I try to use my strength, is to be really supportive of the students and provide them with a very supportive and consistent atmosphere. I think about parenting styles. Now, I might get some flack for this. We're not parents in the classroom. But when I think about parenting styles, there are 3 main types. And the type that produces an environment in which kids or students learn, take risks, and can try new things is this authoritative type of parenting style. And essentially what I mean by that is to just be more of a coach than an expert, to provide some ideas about how to study for an exam, particularly an exam for Psych 101, how to be responsive and concise and kind in my emails. I have this mutual respect for students. And I think they feel that. I think they can feel that being conveyed through my communication. So I'll post announcements that are both kind of witty and fun, but I'll also try to post an announcement like, you have an exam coming up. Here are 5 things that you can do to prepare for that. So I'm always keeping these things in mind, but one of the things for me that I also need to keep in mind is that I need to protect my time. We all teach online, and I think we all kind of know at this point that the amount of time you put into an online class can be endless, or it could be structured and at least defined. So in order to manage my own time, I always have master feedback documents where I reuse old announcements that I update, of course, and master emails for plagiarism or late assignments and things like that. So I don't have to rewrite over and over again the same responses. Generally speaking, I feel like my classes are so organized that I don't get a lot of questions from students, probably 5 a week, which for 70 students is not too much. I think I'm pretty detailed in describing. Anyhow, so I also think of other tips like creating groups for test accommodations. I'll actually show you how to do that so that you don't have to individually, for each individual student, change the time for every exam. There's a way to do that that makes it a lot faster. And I always copy the module structure and then insert the content. So I'm always reusing, in order to be consistent, the same module structure over and over again. And I have my own personal rule of if a student emails me and it's going to take me less than 5 minutes to respond, I respond then, right now. I always find that if I postpone responding, then either I'm going to get I'm going to forget to go back and do it, or it's going to get lost. Unless I'm frustrated with the student, then I'll wait the 5 minutes so that I can write an email that's responsive, just less reactionary. So all that thinking leads to the course assignments. So for Psych 101, the main assignments are, obviously they're doing the reading, watching video content, watching the HIPs. They're participating in Launchpad activities, which I tend to love, actually. They're really helpful in bringing concepts into interactive practice for students. The group discussions are generally application-based prompts where they either have to they have a concept that they have to apply to their own life. It's really easy in intro psych because we're all human, so we all do these things. So they just have to figure out how can they give an example or provide an example from their own experience. And for group discussions, it's just the typical original post and 2 responses, but on at least 2 different days. And then I give them 4 exams, and they have to use the lockdown browser for that. So that's kind of the overlay. I mean, it's more my thinking, how I approach the class and how that kind of grows over time, but it builds to create this really organized course. So I want to show you, give you a walk through of the course. So here it is. First thing I want to show you is announcements. And I always think my announcements are a little too long, but this is my main way of communicating with folks. And I say this early on to them, that this is my way of conveying important information. So you can see I post a lot of videos, or I bold things. I make sure that it's highlighted and emphasized. I create links if I can to, like in the Halloween week, my witty thing was cue the spooky music, but I linked them to an article about how Halloween is related to psychology. It's just for interest's sake. It's not necessary. It's not graded or anything. It's just for fun. The main thing I want to show you is that at the very beginning of the course, I make sure to always do a nice little welcome video just to build community. And I post it either as a link or as the video itself. And then what I like about the video program that I use is that it shows them the length of time that each video is. So it's a really good practice to indicate how long a video is so that they can manage their own time. But this is already embedded and it already does the closed captioning for me as well. And then you could see here, I wanted to show one other part. This is one discussion, one point of clarification where I just say, a lot of you were saying this, but let me explain this a little bit more. So rather than providing that individual level that everyone can see, everyone had a common error that I was addressing. And this was right before their first exam. So I explained what's on the test, what should you study, be prepared to compare, little things that they can sort of focus in on. And I give them an example. The other piece that I wanted to share is the module structure. Actually, let me go into student mode if I can. So how I organize my modules is the most current modules on top, and then I leave everything else open from earlier in the semester. And I organize it and I color code it. So they know that these 3 blue ones are related to test number 2, and that these 3 are related to test number 1. So I try to keep it organized in that way. So in each module, I have your basic format, your to-do list, your sub-modules. And in reading assignments, I have direct links to the ebook. So it's all integrated, deep integration. And you can see the HIPs are here. I try to provide 3 or less per week so that they're not inundated with me talking. But they also have videos that they can view here, which are more of the other videos that might be supplemental, that might help them learn something about the topic or it's important. And then I provide links to discussions and any additional next steps that they'll need to take. So I use this structure in every single module so that they can predict what they're going to look like. They don't have to go looking for anything. They know what order things are in and they can find it easily. The other part that I wanted to share is about groups. I use groups a lot to help me basically organize the course. So if the students have a discussion assignment, they would just click on discussions. And what would happen is in my student preview, I'm assigned to group 1, 2, and 3. That's so that I can look as a group, as a teacher and go in. But they would only see their discussion group listed. And so when they click on their discussion group, they would see the students who are in that group, as well as the discussion board itself. So when they click on that, then they can get into the different discussions. So just as an example of the types of prompts that I use are this past week or the week before, they were discussing our cognitive distortions and our cognitive tendencies. And there are a ton of different types in cognitive psychology. And so their task was to think of an example of one of these types of cognitive tendencies. And they did a great job. I mean, they were able to figure out kind of like how a representative heuristic is somewhat similar to a stereotype and things like that. So they really shared their kind of deep personal experiences. And some of them were using the concept of overconfidence, and being overconfident in something can distort our true ability in something. That's the kind of the basics of that idea. But they applied it to this class, to Psych 101, that they walked in with a lot of overconfidence, having heard that Psych 101 is really easy and such. And so they use that as an example. And of course, 10 other students concurred with that feeling. So they're in their small groups. So let me go back to the groups. So you can see, like, in a 70-person class, there's only about 20 in this particular group. So you might wonder, how do you grade that? And the easiest way I go about doing that is to go directly to discussion. So now I'm in the teacher mode, and I can go into the discussion, and I won't show grades, I promise. So if I go in here and I grade, you can see the list of students and how many posts they did. You don't know how many it's out of. So let me go back. And the rubric that I use, I use the rubrics right that are embedded in, and I'm sure most of us do, right in the Blackboard system. And I love this because I can provide all kinds of feedback on any of these criteria. And generally speaking, when I said that I provided that individual level feedback, if I'm giving somebody something other than exemplary or good, I definitely am putting something in there to explain how they could do better. But even at these levels, I'll say, if they missed opportunities to apply key terms or concepts, that's what I'll add in here. But I have a master list of all those pieces of feedback so that I don't have to recreate the reel for every assignment and every student. Another thing that I do to save time, and this is a trick, when I talk to people who also teach online, they're like, show them the trick about the test accommodations, because it just saves a lot of time. So I'm going to show you how to do that. If you give exams and you have to provide time and a half or double time for students, one of the easiest way to do is create a group for those students. So I'm going to pop over to my sandbox class for a minute. Okay. So in order to do that, it's really easy. You just go to groups, users and groups, to groups, and you create a single manual enroll group. So essentially, when you're creating a group where you're going to enroll students into this time and a half group, but make sure that this is turned off. You don't want the other students to know that they're in that group. So this is so very important, right? So make sure that's turned off. And then everything else you don't need. I mean, you could leave them on. No one can see the group except for you. So it doesn't really matter if these are on or off. So I'm not going to spend the time going through it all. But then I'm going to add users. So these are me and a couple of my friends. And I'm going to add, I know this student needs time and a half. I know I need time and a half on that test. And then I submit it. Now this group has been made. Okay. And I always will double check. Nope, they can't see it. I don't want it to be visible. But when I go to an exam now, and I would need to, for me, sometimes if I have 150 students, I have to do this for 10 students who need extra time, and I have to do it individually. So now when I go to the exam, where's an exam? Here's an exam. Nope. I go to the exam and I edit the options. Go to the usual place where you make that adjustment. But then I'm going to select a group called time and a half that I already created. And then I just change the time here. What is that, 130 minutes or so? I'm not even sure. And then it's going to apply that timer to everyone who's in that group. So it makes it a really slick way to kind of avoid having to add in for every individual exam. Okay. So that's kind of my main tour of my class. It's really straightforward, really clear. I try to be as organized as I can be. And when I talk to students about what their experience is in Psych 101 online, asynchronous, mostly what I hear from them is these main things. Most organized class I've ever been in. Enjoy the discussions. She makes me feel like she's here with us the whole time, the whole way. They love the Launchpad assignments. And I get a lot of feedback that I convey that I care about their learning, which makes me really happy. So that's my walkthrough. That's my kind of my mindset or my thinking about it.